It's a great pleasure to welcome this afternoon, to start off this afternoon's proceedings, Alan Langlands. Alan Langlands has done every important job in British medicine and academic life. He's now on his second vice-chancellorship. Before that he was Chief Executive of the NHS, then he was Chief Executive of HEFCE, but his most important role in the past has been as Chairman of Biobank, and he was my predecessor. I take, as I always say, great credit for Biobank, even though I can't actually really take any credit for its success at all. But Alan Langlands is somewhat different. Alan, come and tell them the story.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I mean, it wasn't only a kind of interlude in a whole lot of other things that I was doing at the time, but Biobank is, I think, probably the most enjoyable thing I've ever done. I was always interested in the scientific basis of health service, have been for 43 years in different guises, but boy did I have fun in Biobank. And I thought I would say a little bit about the past, but of course Biobank is a dynamic and moving picture, so I thought I might just take the risk of commenting a little bit on the present as well. It's very appropriate, I think, to have this meeting in Manchester because, of course, the UK Biobank Coordinating Centre, the hub of its national and indeed international network, is in Stockport. And the formal launch of UK Biobank, which was on the 15th of March 2006, saw the very first participants to volunteer to spend, it said at the time, about an hour, because we weren't very sure, at an assessment centre in Altrincham. And they would go there, they would be answering questions, having some standard measurements taken, giving a small amount of blood and small urine samples. And these people, who were mainly from South Manchester, were the trailblazers of Biobank. Now this sounds all very kind of modest, really, but it was the beginning of something that I think is really important and that has become really important. Rory Collins at the time, with a good deal of excitement I remember on that day, said, "Nothing like this has been attempted before in such fine detail or on such a vast scale." And that is an interesting feature of Biobank. It has great breadth, but it also has tremendous depth. I predicted at the time, slightly with my tongue in my cheek, that it would lead to new ways to prevent and treat disease, although I cleverly didn't say how long that might take. But from the absolute outset, this was, in my view, a public good initiative. It was going to demand a great team effort from the funders, from the Ethics and Governance Council, from the participants most of all, from the scientific community, and of course the Biobank staff, whom have been so ably led by Rory and Tim Peakman. So I'm thrilled to see all of these groups represented today and represented in support of what I think just today, never mind the last 10 or 15 years, just today is a kind of rich scientific program. I think it's fair to say that the launch of UK Biobank received a slightly mixed reception, or more accurately, the path to the launch of UK Biobank was maybe not a terribly smooth one. But it had some very strong supporters, important supporters. So Sidney Brenner, the 2002 Nobel Prize winner in Physiology and Medicine, said, "By studying the relationship between genes, lifestyle and environmental factors, the UK Biobank will be the future of medical research. So coming from him, that was pretty good endorsement. Summed up more quickly, of course, by the Manchester Metro, which simply said the most important medical research in Britain. One of the very first participants in the study, a 52-year-old woman from Didsbury, who had just given up her job to look after her elderly mother, said at the time, "My father, who had diabetes and heart disease, died last year, so I wanted to do it because I felt it would be a good way to assist research, especially when I read that it would be looking at heart disease and diabetes. I might have inherited some of the things that can lead to heart disease. I can't do anything about my genetic inheritance," she said, "but I can take care of my health into the future, and who knows, Biobank might help me when I'm 70. So only a few years to go, folks. She also went on to say, "I have 4 children, and my daughter, who is having her second baby, has just developed gestational diabetes. Their health is important to me as well. So I have reasons," she said, "in the past, the present, and the future for taking part in Biobank and having faith in it." So that's a good endorsement. And it was based on a promise. Nature, the great scientific journal, Nature's headline said, "Huge biobank project launches despite its critics." And these critics at the time were mainly people, usually scientists with vested interests, who were concerned, they said, about value for money. But they were also hooked on the notion of studying the families of sick people with disease genes as their main kind of target. But Rory, at that time, was able to put them straight by complex and I think very persuasive argument. But to sum it up, he was clear that the primary use of this resource was to compare people who develop disease with those who don't. Researchers will then be able, he said, to examine the lifestyles and genetic factors that differentiate the two groups, and so it has proved. And in 2012, coming to the funders, as I was standing down as the chair, the main funders, who I can assure you had not been easy to handle in the early stages because they were worried about reaction from the community and indeed the wider public. But they wrote to me saying, and again, as Mike said, nothing to do with me, they wrote to me saying, UK Biobank has moved from its rather shaky start to become a project that is admired, and rightly so, around the world. So we should take pride in that, and we should also, all of us here, I think, take great pride in the fact that unlike some other genetic database projects, if you like, if I can call them that, unlike that, critics have been notably thin on the ground in relation to issues of data privacy or indeed wider ethical issues. Because I think both of these issues have been handled with great sensitivity and expertise, and the team, by which I mean everyone involved in Biobank, including the wonderful Ethics and Governance Council, everyone stayed true to the principle of serving the public good and, of course, to the rigour of informed consent. So reflecting back on the development of this great study, I think its success was based on scientific vision, on complexity reduction, on innovative technology and systems, and also a leadership team with outstanding influencing and communication skills. A team that was able, on the one hand, to talk to the public in sensible terms, but also talk to the funders and the policymakers. So this is a project that was planned, I can assure you, within an inch of its life, and it's being implemented now, I think, with great skill and speed and determination, and an attention to detail, and that's a kind of rare combination. So for me, UK Biobank has three main characteristics which make it special. Firstly, it is science-led, with I think now more than 200 scientists supporting its development, including an outstanding international scientific advisory board. Important always to have a group of people in the know who will hold your feet to the fire in these situations, and a whole number of specialist working groups. In the period before 2006, I can remember being very impatient about the development of the original scientific protocol. But the care taken at that time over its design, the rationale for the size of the participant group, and the thought that went into the sort of baseline questionnaire, the physical measurements, the biological samples, have all paid dividends and have all proved to be future-proof, because in that timescale, of course, biomedical science has been advancing in all sorts of other ways. So all too often, these big projects can be diverted, sometimes even derailed by squabbles about funding, scientific prejudices, mission creep, and unhelpful bureaucracy, especially when there's so much money involved. And on the whole, in Biobank, all of that has been avoided. The second characteristic, I think, is that it's never lost momentum. The initial recruitment and assessment of the 500,000 participants was delivered on time and on budget. The follow-up of selected participants is now being achieved through linkage of and access to medical and other health-related records, through online contact with participants, and of course through face-to-face contact. And significant populations of incident cases, which I'm sure you've been hearing about this morning, are building largely as predicted. Exciting enhancements have been made to the main study. Again, things that we didn't predict in detail at the time, but we thought could happen. So enhancements involving genotyping, biochemical assays, imaging, and also enhancements to what I think is really kind of highly secure and future-proofed IT infrastructure. All of these things have been happening in real time over the past few years, and of course there are plans afoot to do more. And the funders throughout that period have been generous in their core funding, and they've supported enhancements because they can see, I think, the exceptional national and international importance of this work. So momentum has been maintained. The final point, of course, and we all have to say this nowadays, is that this is a project with impact. The resource was open for research use in April 2012. This was ahead of time. I think in 2006, when we were launching, or maybe, sorry, March 2004, we thought that this might take 10 years, but it's been handled in a shorter time. And now we have more than 4,000, I think, researchers who have registered to use this, with several hundred projects already underway. So, for example, my university, the University of Leeds, not far from here, we have 6 projects at the moment, fully approved, and 2 which have been just invited to submit full applications. So just to give you an example of the range from one university, we have a pilot study to decide the morbidity burden and identify potential causes of 2 age-associated autoimmune diseases. So giant cell arteritis, inflammation of the arteries, and polymyalgia rheumatic. So this is pain and inflammation in the muscles around the shoulders, the neck, and the hip. We've also been successful through Biobank in having a major genetic epidemiology study of melanoma and melanoma survival, and we have a study ongoing aimed at advancing understanding, prediction, prevention and treatment of coronary heart disease using the genetic data that's being generated in UK Biobank. There are other interesting studies on physical activity and sleep. the effect of population stratification on genome-wide association studies, and a study on visual impairment and hearing. So this kind of underlies, if you like, or underlines the versatility and indeed the flexibility and the richness of the biobank resource. At a personal level, a very personal level, I learned a great deal from UK Biobank that has influenced me and other people in the university in developing what we call the Leeds Institute of Data Analytics, which is thinking about new approaches to understanding health and human behaviour and tackling a much wider kind of range of, we think, related social and environmental problems. So the ambition of UK Biobank, which I kind of was experiencing firsthand, gave us the self-confidence and has given many other people self-confidence to provide a single home for the MRC Bioinformatics Centre, the ESRC Data Research Centre, our great cancer research colorectal intelligence hub, and indeed has now extended to include the National Centre for Atmospheric Science, which is also based in Leeds. Kind of in getting towards kind of wrapping up, I want to return to my public good theme for a second and extend this from the first participants in Altrincham to the people of the world, if you like. UK Biobank is a resource for academic or commercial researchers to use for any type of health-related research that is thought to be in the public interest. And it enables prospective studies in investigating the relevance of a wide range of exposures to health outcomes. And it's the now, in the current world of biobank, the identification and adjudication of increasing numbers of incident cases that will support powerful research into the determinants of these common conditions that you've been talking about through the day. New ways to prevent and treat disease will result from biobank. So whilst you probably saw, I think, this morning that the number of incident cases of diabetes in biobank was probably this year about 13,000, it's worth remembering that over 4 million people in this country are living with diabetes. The NHS is spending £192 million per week on this, and the global burden of type 2 diabetes is predicted to increase, wait for it, to 600 million by 2030. The figure right now for India and China alone is stretching towards 200 million people. So in this context, investment in UK Biobank over all of these years of about £200 million, I think will certainly prove to be money well spent. And of course, we could provide similar examples in relation to lung cancer or coronary heart disease. The other thing is, when you look beyond the UK and focus on that wider public good, it's also worth noting, I think, that only 1 in 5 of low or middle income countries have the necessary data to drive their policies and their plans and their provision for cancer. And that 80% of deaths from cardiovascular disease, maybe 17.5, 18 million per year in the world, 80% of these deaths now happen in low and middle income countries. So UK Biobank, just to draw to a close, is, I think, an outstanding resource. We have a duty to ensure that the health research it generates is exploited to the full, both here and across the world, ultimately. The opportunities for collaboration, I think, with similar studies around the world, many which are not quite mimicking, but certainly have been inspired by UK Biobank, is also increasing, and that's important for the future. So I feel very privileged to have been invited here to your meeting. I applaud the vision of the MRC, the Wellcome Trust, the National Institute for Health Research, the British Heart Foundation, Cancer Research UK, also my colleagues in Scotland, and I was working in Scotland at the time that the study was launched, Scotland and Wales, and dozens of universities, not just in the UK but around the world, have all contributed to this great endeavour. But I'm going to take a risk, which I never do on these things, and mention two people in particular, because I personally want to congratulate Rory Collins and Tim Peakman, two of the very best colleagues that I've ever worked with, for all that they have achieved. And of course they have been assisted by hundreds of people, but they've led it, and they've led it well, ably assisted by the Biobank team and all of you, its supporters and many more beyond. So I'm sure that UK Biobank will continue to go from strength to strength. Thank you for having me.